Donald Trump has signed a $140 billion arms deal with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh. The US President is on a 4-day tour of the Gulf, the first major foreign trip of his second term. Mr. Trump had hinted he may take a detour to Istanbul for Ukraine-Russia peace talks, but now says his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, will attend for him. Volodymyr Zelensky said he'll meet Turkish President Erdoğan and wait for Vladimir Putin to turn up.
Saudi fighter jets escorted Air Force One as it landed in Riyadh. US President Donald Trump was welcomed by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman before a military guard greeted him at the Saudi royal court. The President and the Crown Prince signed an economic agreement that included a massive $142 billion arms deal, where the US will provide Saudi with air and missile defence, air force and space advancement, maritime security and communication systems. A group of US CEOs, including Elon Musk, are on the trip that will focus on economic deals the White House says could be worth trillions, rather than the war in Gaza or Iran nuclear talks. During the 4-day tour of the Gulf, he will also visit the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, whose royal family has offered to gift President Trump a new Boeing 747 to be used as Air Force One, like this one that was gifted to Turkey. Mr. Trump dismissed ethical concerns, saying he would be stupid not to accept the plane. Though it's not on the itinerary, he had hinted he might go to Turkey, where he expects both the Ukrainian and Russian presidents to meet, but said today his Secretary of State will attend for him.
They could produce some pretty good results. Our people are going to be going there. Marco's going to be going there.
President Zelensky said that he will meet Turkish President Erdoğan on Thursday and wait to see if Mr. Putin joins them.
I think that Putin does not want the end of the war, does not want a ceasefire, does not want any talks. I'm not even mentioning that he's scared of direct talks with me.
It sounds like he's not expecting Vladimir Putin to turn up, who said today he's not afraid of new sanctions threatened by Europe and the US if Russia fails to agree to a ceasefire. Fergal Gallagher, RTE News.
We're joined now by Europe editor Tony Connolly. Tony, Volodymyr Zelensky says he'll be in Istanbul on Thursday. What's Europe doing to encourage Vladimir Putin to join him as well?
Well, this latest plot twist, David, started on at the weekend when the leaders of Britain, Poland, Germany and France were in Kyiv to meet President Zelensky, and they called for an immediate and unconditional 30-day ceasefire. And if Russia didn't comply, they would then, with the United States, enforce massive new sanctions. Now, they understood that President Trump was behind them on that particular threat. Vladimir Putin then on Sunday said he would, or a Russian delegation would go to Turkey on Thursday. He didn't mention anything about a ceasefire. And then President Trump said this would be a great idea and urged Ukraine to accept that idea immediately. Now, that completely undercut the European position, which they believed had been squared with Washington. Now, President Putin has said nothing about a ceasefire. The Russian government is still saying that the origins of this war have to be addressed before there's any ceasefire, and they've even talked again about what they call denazification of the Kyiv regime. And of course, the initial talking point was that Ukraine was somehow a threat to Russia. Now, this leaves the Europeans in something of a quandary, because if President Putin doesn't show up and if there is no ceasefire, then can Europe go ahead with this massive new sanctions package? If the United States is not on board now, Chancellor Merz, the German Chancellor, has talked about financial and energy sanctions, but of course for the European Union to get a big new sanctions package over the line, they need the support of countries like Hungary, which of course Viktor Orban has been a strong supporter of Vladimir Putin. So this leaves the European position somewhat exposed, and it's not clear if President Trump will back the European position if Vladimir Putin doesn't show up to these talks on Thursday.
Returning now to President Donald Trump's Middle East tour, I've been talking to Belle True, Chief International Correspondent with the London Independent. I first asked her if the main focus of the visit was business or politics.
crucially, right now, in terms of his trip to Saudi Arabia, it's about money. It's about deals. It could even be about $1 trillion worth of deals. That's what's being touted right now. But obviously, it's his first major foreign visit, so that adds some gravitas to it. And it's been successful. We saw some extraordinary scenes of him being welcomed in an extraordinary manner in Saudi Arabia. We've heard already the statistics in terms of what's been signed with hundreds of billions of dollars of deals and weapons deals. That's obviously going to bring Donald Trump and the authorities in Saudi Arabia much closer together. But of course, this comes in the backdrop of situation in the Middle East. With the situation in Gaza, Donald Trump is obviously going to be trying to get support from the Gulf countries to back some form of deal that he wants, some kind of ceasefire deal. The question is whether that is going to be properly discussed in this meeting or whether it's just going to be discussions about investments and arms sales.
Now, pointedly, he is not going to Israel on this trip. He's been talking about what a great friend he is of the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. Should the Israelis be worried that perhaps his unwavering support isn't quite as unwavering anymore?
I think if we look at this in terms of history, Israel and the US have always had deeply close ties, even if Donald Trump is in the middle of a spat with Benjamin Netanyahu, as many sources are pointing to. In the end, the most important ally in the region will always be Israel for the US. If you take a look at any of the statements that the administration has been saying. But of course, he's not making his first foreign visit to Israel. He is going to Saudi Arabia. There is a vast sum of money that's involved in this, and that's something that's very important to Donald Trump. And at the same time, it comes as we're getting reports that there is, a really strong breakdown of relations between Trump and Netanyahu, and particularly as Trump appears to be very angry with Netanyahu's behavior in Gaza and response to US calls for a ceasefire. But that said, Saudi Arabia and Israel were on the cusp of potentially even forming normalized ties before the war in Gaza erupted in October 2023. So it's not Saudi Arabia is an enemy of Israel. It's not like Donald Trump is trying to cozy up to Iran. In fact, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the US all share the same diplomatic opinion, which is one that is against Iran. So I think in that regard, it isn't so much of a slight to Netanyahu, but certainly it comes amid reports that relations between the White House and between Netanyahu's administration are not good.
And meanwhile, as all this goes on, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza just gets worse.
A UN-backed food security alert has said that 1 in 5 people in Gaza, that's 500,000 people, are facing starvation right now. And that is because of an Israeli-imposed full blockade on aid and supplies into the tiny, already devastated strip. I talk to people on the ground every day. I'm talking to mothers who are living off rice, water and salt, who can't breastfeed, whose newborns may die because they're malnourished. I spoke to another mother who had a 3-year-old daughter who weighs little more than a newborn because she is also hungry and also suffering from diseases because they can't get hold of clean water. There's also incredibly hard bombardment that's continuing. Netanyahu has made it clear that he wants to expand and intensify the operation in Gaza despite global outcry. And there doesn't seem to be any real movement on a ceasefire deal. We have seen extraordinary, unprecedented direct talks between Hamas militant group and the Trump administration, which saw the release of a US Israeli soldier just yesterday. But in terms of Hamas-Israel talks and the hopes of a ceasefire, that still seems quite far off on the horizon. And in the interim, it's the civilians of Gaza and also the hostages, the 58 remaining hostages and captives who are inside Gaza who are suffering. Right now, the situation is beyond catastrophic. People are either facing death by bombs or death by starvation.
Belle True, Chief International Correspondent of the London Independent. Thanks for joining us on 6-1.
Thank you.